welcome to each one of you for this another edition of Uncommon Leader. Again, outstanding speaker, outstanding achiever, outstanding achievement. We are going to listen short while from now. And empowering leadership featuring Kirthi Jayakumar, founder and CEO of the Gender Security Project. Before I call upon the speaker and hand over to our conversation to carry on the session with AVIS, let me briefly tell you what's happening in MMA so that you don't miss any one of them, because there's so many mails coming, not only from MMA, so many is coming from other areas, so many webcasts. The moment you see web, you delete actually. So that's why we want to really remind you so that some of the best programs, you don't delete them, you watch them, because we can't help it. Pandemic the situation requires different innovative things. Everybody is thinking innovative and creating so many webinars. So if you get it, you just watch them, you enjoy them, but we curate and bring in some outstanding programs and you watch them because the numbers prove that how good we are able to bring it to them. We get some outstanding participants by the people because the quality of the speakers are very good. Let me tell you, tomorrow, that is tomorrow, the Thursday, the 2nd of July, we have a lecture by Debashish Sharkar. He's one of the authority on Kaizen and one of the internationally known, and he's head of some of the international organizations. He's going to speak to us on leading virtually in the times of COVID-19. Debashish Sharkar, tomorrow, same time, 6 o'clock is happening today. Then on the 10th of our Friday, 10th of July is our MMA AGM. We got Sanjay Kirloskar, who is Chairman Managing Director of Kirloskar Brothers Limited, is kindly agreed to address as a chief guest, and please do join. This is the first time in the history of MMA we are going to do an AGM online. We are well prepared. We have really done a lot of work on that. So please do come, and we look forward to seeing you. 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, followed by 7 o'clock, we have the business sessions, the annual report, and the notice, and all the details have already been sent to you. Now, we also follow the latest state-of-art digital system issue, wherein you can flip through all the reports and which you can go through embedded videos. And we also bring out the outstanding business mandate during the occasion of AGM. Again, we have used a modern technology to bring out outstanding. It will be like Economist or New York Times to read it out, and we got a lot of embedded videos of each of the articles and a lot of some of the ads which has come. You can click it, you can go to the website, we can give you a number of footfall. Ideas, we are trying to reach out to our large number of readers base. We got about 55,000-60,000 people read our business mandate. We really want to connect with them to the outstanding products and outstanding articles. This is the time going to be one of the finest business mandate issue. Now onwards, thanks to pandemic, we learned no more printing, no more courier. All our magazines will be online digital magazine with outstanding content. So please do read them, enjoy them, and it will be a pleasure to have you with us. Again, on the 11th, we are doing an outstanding event. We got 3 outstanding, there are some of the people who are done extremely well post-retirement. And we have picked up 3 post-retirement outstanding guys who are done. One is Nandu Nandakishore, who is the former head of worldwide Nestle, along with Mr. Balraman, former MD of thing, and also Pandit. These 3 people are going to talk how you should plan your life post-50 actually, and how you like post-60, and life carries on. Lifelong learning is there. So how you have to really give it back to the society or give it back to yourself, your talent which you have learned over a period of 30, 40 years. And with this, what we want to do, that we want to really rekindle the thought process. So many retired persons sitting at home and watching Netflix and Zoom and various, listening to all other things. Also, how they can contribute productively. We want to really reactivate this segment of community to give it back to the society in a big way. I think it will kindle the thought process of many. Please watch it out on the 11th. Is going to be another interesting event. Then on the Saturday, the 18th, again, outstanding program. I'll walk miles to listen to him. Anand Kripalu. Anand Kripalu is the MD and CEO of Digeo Global Executive Committee. He's going to be speaking on what is one of the Ponds veteran. What is his journey of success over a period? Heading Digeo is one of the world's largest manufacturer of liquor. So I think it's worth listening to him. He's going to be talking to us on the 18th. Then we have also some outstanding event. The next Saturday, that is Saturday the 25th, we have again leaders speak. Satyanarayana Ramamurthy is a partner, head of infrastructure, government of healthcare, KPMG Singapore, is going to be talking to us. He's going to talk to us on another important leadership lessons from working in partnership environment. Today, the partnership environment is very, when you work from home, the partnership environment is all the more very important. How do you really make the best use of the partnership environment? He's going to be talking to authority on this, and he heads the KPMG division to do that. Then on the 31st of July, we also have another external event. It's on all about brand. We got Shailesh Arbakti. We are doing it jointly with Equator. So I'll stop it with 31st July. Let's focus on today's thing. And there are programs all done till December, entire August. We'll share with you as soon as possible. Coming to today's topic, the Uncommon Leader Empowering Entrepreneurship. Kirthi Jayakumar, founder and CEO of Gender Security Project. And you listen to her profile, it's outstanding. Out of an organization, we all struggle with so much of contracts, so much of number to an NGO. Look at this lady who is doing something good for the society, make the people really understand what's happening, what should not be happening, and how the people to sensitize them. At the end of the day, many things doesn't happen, including COVID, as just now AVIS said. You sensitize the people, we have masks, stay social distancing. Like that, it has to be embedded in each one of us, that this habit. If this has happened, I think we achieved our objective. And to take you through the conversation, as usual, we have our own charming and always mesmerizing in his conversations. Is AVIS, AVIS introduction is very, very tough because he's got a very long introduction. I want to make it very short and so hand it over to him. AVIS, the happy wala, we present to you. AVIS, please, all yours. We take over and we look forward to your great session. A very warm welcome to you, Kirthi, and looking forward to hearing your inspiring story. Over to you, AVIS.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, MMA, for hosting us one more time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this evening's edition of the Uncommon Leader. This is our 29th edition in this series. My name is AVIS, and somewhere in the audience is also Vaani, who is my soulmate. We both are the happynesswalas. We are going through a fascinating, life-changing experience. Google us to know more about us, happynesswalas, happynesswalas. Our life's purpose, Vaani and I believe, is inspiring happiness. And this purpose we embraced, it found us rather, as we are going through in the present continuous tense, as we are going through and dealing with a crippling bankruptcy for the last 13 years. This means that for the longest time in this past decade, we've been living without work and without money, worklessness and pennilessness. We've been dealing with these over these last 13 years. And it naturally pushed us into a dark space. Materially, we've been living a very challenged life, and yet at the same time, we awoke to a beautiful discovery. We realized that we could be happy despite our circumstances. And we learned that by training our mind to be non-worrying, non-frustrated, and non-suffering. Now, when you are non-worrying, non-frustrated, and non-suffering, you can only be happy. We employed this discovery to live a life of purpose. We flipped the paradigm. On one side, we are still struggling with success in finding it, which is in a worldly sense. We are unable to cover even our living expenses month on month. But in struggling with finding success, we said we cannot be beaten down. We cannot be pinned down. How about trying to be useful even when we are trying to be successful? And so we found a way to express ourselves, to share with the world what we have learned about life and happiness, and try to be useful to people that pause to care and reflect. So in 2014, my book came out, Fall Like a Rose Petal, where I share lessons on how to be happy and content while living without money. In 2019, the Tamil translation of this book, Udirum Roja Idar Pola, came out, and both are available on Amazon. We employed this at the next level. We retooled our business, and today we run a small boutique consulting firm where we distill lessons on life and happiness for managers and inspire them to high performance. We also curate and host 3 conversations, live, reflective, non-commercial conversations on the theme of happiness. The Uncommon Leader is the 3rd in this conversation series and is hosted with by the MMA for the last 5 years. So to introduce the Uncommon Leader series, let me tell you that this is a series that celebrates people who are primarily very happy in life. They're happy because they're doing what they believe in doing. They're happy because they love what they're doing. And as they do what they're doing, they don't ask themselves this question, what's in it for me? They ask instead, how can I create value? How can I create a better world? Now, these people, these uncommon leaders that we are in conversation with in this series are people who sometimes are from the corporate sector, sometimes they are from a business background, but we've also spoken to people in these last 5 years who are not from that background. They bring with them a higher sense of purpose, surely, but they don't necessarily come with enterprise or business or management or corporate backgrounds. And yet, all these journeys that we have been exploring over these last 5 years, all of them have had one thing in common. There are lessons to be drawn for managers, for people in the corporate sector, for entrepreneurs, and for students of management. And each of these people is doing this because they feel that their entire being is contributing to their work. They don't see themselves as different from their work. They see that as one. Now, we all want a beautiful world. We all want a world which is compassionate, which is result-oriented, which is productive, which is purposeful, which is caring. We all envision this world, but the uncommon leaders go to work on creating this world. That's what makes them uncommon leaders. And that's what really our guest this evening, Kirthi Jayakumar, is also all about. She is an uncommon leader too. And I'm going to introduce her in just about a minute. But before that, let me tell you what is the structure for today's conversation. You see, this is a conversation. It's not an interview. It's not a panel discussion. It's not a Q&A. It's not an interview in that sense where I'm asking just a few questions. I think every time Kirthi answers something that I ask her, I'm going to glean lessons from her journey and share it with all of you. So there will be some very powerful, relatable takeaways for each of you. We will go all the way to 7:10 between me and Kirthi, and then I'll open the floor for questions. You may leave your questions in the chat box or reach the questions to MMA as you normally do. And we'll pick up a few questions for discussion today, and we will close the conversation between Kirthi and me and the Q&A at about 7:25, and I'll hand it back to Group Captain Vijay Kumar of MMA for his vote of thanks, and we will end today's program at 7:30. So that's the structure that we have. Let me now introduce Kirthi to you and then invite her to be in conversation with me. So Kirthi and we go back a few years. We were introduced by a common friend, and Kirthi was also my guest in another conversation series, a popular one that we host called the Bliss Catchers, where we speak to people who have gone on to do what they love doing in life. And in season 3 of that series in 2017 in March, we had Kirthi in conversation with me. And at that time, I remember exploring why does she do what she loves doing? Kirthi wakes up every day to create a safer world for women. That's what drives her. And she has been a survivor of abuse and bullying herself. Not only that, when the Delhi gang rape happened in 2012 in December, all of us were shocked, we were numbed, and so was Kirthi. But she decided that she had to do something about it. And she said she cannot be a bystander watching what was happening. So she had a personal experience in her own way. She was numbed by what was happening to her, around her, in the context of what we all saw. And she said, how can I make a difference? How can I create a better world? And that effort has led today to becoming the Gender Security Project, a project where through advocacy, through research, through education, Kirthi and her team of about 700 volunteers globally, they drive a vision to create a world which is built on the principles of peace, gender equity, and inclusion. It must be tough in these times when every day you're hearing of newer cases of violence, abuse, and inequality being shown towards women. It must be difficult running an enterprise like Gender Security Project and a not-for-profit movement without funds flowing in freely. It must be difficult just working on helping survivors on a day in, day out basis. She is, although she doesn't have an engineering background or a technology background, Kirthi has created Sahas, an app which helps people in distress, which gives them a support system when they are caught in a violent or in an abusive environment. In the lockdown in India, Kirthi and her team have had more than 1,100 survivors reach out for help using the Sahas app. So it must be very difficult and challenging to lead this initiative and keep going day on day on day. How does Kirthi do this? What kind of entrepreneurial and leadership lessons can we draw from her? That's really what we're going to discuss today with Kirthi. I'm personally very, very delighted to have Kirthi in this conversation with me, because to me, she personifies purpose, she embodies humility, and as you will discover in this conversation along with me, she has an exemplary sense of focus. So I'm here to learn a few lessons from Kirthi. One more time, thank you, Kirthi, for joining us. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here, AVIS-Vaani, and of course the team from MMA. It's an absolute pleasure to have these conversations with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I welcome you all. We are starting the conversation with Kirthi now, and I'm going with my first question to Kirthi. Kirthi, what about the world today disturbs you? What makes you feel like waking up and going, with renewed vigor every day to solve the problem? So what is the complexity of this problem that we are dealing with? Most of us feel angry with this situation of violence against women, but I don't think any of us understands the complexity and enormity of it. So while I may be using a rather, very weak word, saying what disturbs you, I'm actually asking you, how big is this challenge, and what keeps you awake and drives you to go do what you're doing?
Avis, one of the things that drives me personally is the fact that my existence on this planet is not free. I don't live rent-free on this planet. So where I live a life that is painless, that is free of trauma, that is free of violence, somebody else is unfortunately living the exact opposite. And that makes me very, very angry. Whether we like it or not, this universe works on balances where one is benefited, another is not. And that then puts the onus on us to be the bridge between what we have and what another doesn't. So the bigger of many issues for me personally is the fact that gender is a basis for people to be discriminated against, institutionally or societally or even culturally, and in several cases religion-wise. And the fact that a person's humanity can be debated, that their gender can be a basis to disqualify or to deprive them of that humanity, it doesn't sit well with me. Because I don't believe that as humans who are fundamentally equal by virtue of being part of the species they belong to, we don't have any basis to deprive another human being of their full life of dignity. And that for me feels extremely uncomfortable, disturbing, and on many days filled with rage. At the same time, though, I acknowledge that rage can be a destructive and a creative emotion. And the key is in our hands. Do we want to be destructive about it? Do we want to then keep a cycle of violence alive? Or do we want to try to be creative and switch off that cycle of violence in a way that transcends it, transforms it, and sets up a culture of peace? speaks to the root cause, speaks to what put that violence in that situation in the first place, what made that violence possible, and then try to dismantle it somehow. And this is a massive, massive problem, Avis. It's not something that we see only in the newspaper headlines in our city. It transcends borders, it transcends race, it transcends caste, and in several situations, because of certain marginalized realities, because of individuals belonging to particular races, castes, or nationalities, the violence is greater. They not only face violence in the personal front, but that's also amplified several times because of an institutional and a structural imbalance that is stacked up against them. And I can't say that the thought has not crossed my mind. I want to correct this imbalance. And of course, I acknowledge that it's egoistic to think that I'm the solution, but I would like to maybe dial that down a bit and say I want to be part of that solution.
This is such a profound answer, such a humble answer. I want to be part of the solution. I am not the solution. Is a lot of humility coming at your age. But I'm going to take her answer and for the learning part, I'm going to help us take away a few flavors of learning over here. The first part of the answer is that anger, rage can be destructive and creative, she says. I'll use the word constructive. And the other is a culture of peace. What a beautiful, beautiful phrase there. Even the phraseology is so welcoming, and I wish it was true that we had a culture of peace. So first of all, full marks to you, Kirthi, for demonstrating leadership here, that you are living in a world and you're not living rent-free, and you're living in a world where somebody else is facing a problem, and even if you're not facing the problem, it doesn't make you walk the other way. So that's leadership, because leadership is the ability to sense, to feel, to see what's disturbing us, to sense, feel, and see what makes us angry and sleepless and go to work on it. And anger, which comes with that situation, can be destructive and can be constructive. So anger, when it is destructive, it consumes you. More violence is created. That's what you're saying. The Buddha says it so beautifully also. He says that anger is like, being angry is like holding coal, hot coal in your hand with the intention of throwing it at someone. You are the one who's going to get burnt first. And he says, you don't get punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. So anger by itself is not a solution, but anger deployed, channelized in a constructive manner is a solution. Because without anger, there can be no progress. Because a man got thrown out of a train, and because he asked, why are my fellow people being treated in such a partisan biased manner? It is because of that anger that he channelized as ahimsa and satyagraha and launched the Quit India movement, that we are able to sit here today and have the Zoom call. So anger is a very constructive force. So the culture of peace can come only when you deploy that anger. So if you are angry with a situation and you want to demonstrate leadership, please employ that anger in a constructive manner. That's what we're picking up from Kirthi here. Thank you, Kirthi. That was an amazing start to the conversation. Really loved the clarity, the kind of sense of purpose that you have. So that leads me to my next question. What kind of early influences caused your awakening to this higher purpose? Early influences in your life. I'm saying this because it's been like 8-10 years since you embarked on this journey. And so something early on must have happened in your life that must have pointed you in this direction, and eventually you embraced a higher purpose. But what were those influences?
Sure. So I'm going to play around with the timeline a little bit, mainly because the story gets more interesting in being told that way. But the earliest time that I can remember when I felt uncomfortable about being part of an unjust situation was when I was maybe in first standard, and my mother was teaching me subtraction at home. So she tried to use the analogy of saying, you have 5 apples and I come and take away 2. how many do you have left? So I would look up at her and say, nothing. So she said, no, 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 that's not how it's going to work. You have 5 apples and I take away 2. How many do you have left? So we went back and forth with this and I would just say nothing all the time. She gave up and she said, no, you're going to have 3. So I said, why do you think I will keep 3? I'll give you that also. No, if you wanted to, you may be happy with 3 more, so take it. And she closed the book and just sat in silence for the rest of that evening. It wasn't very long, but she did sit in silence for the rest of that evening. And that story, I think, comes back to me whenever I want to reaffirm my purpose, because you do lose sight of it on some occasions. But in the course of my childhood, I experienced certain things that nobody should experience. And I'm not going to go into it because it can be triggering, but broadly, I went through several years of facing sexual abuse at the hands of people I knew and didn't know, bullying at high school, times when I was also beaten up, and then when I joined college as well, different kinds of incidents of being bullied. And one of the common things that sort of remained a denominator, a common unifying denominator among all of it, was that my gender was one of the most formative bases for that target. And all of this, every element of these memories, these abusive, violent memories, just went into the depths of my mind in a way that they were not part of my cognitive everyday being. Although my behavior manifested it. I was a very lonely person. I preferred sticking with my books. I did not fight. I did not speak like this even. I preferred my silence and sitting in the background. Until the night of 16th December, and everybody knows what happened in 2012 on that night. And I remember this very, very clearly. I was just about finishing my dinner. It was a dinner of rasam sadam and potato chips. And I remember seeing the news and there was a ticker at the bottom, which just had a line which said, girl gang raped, taken to hospital. This was all it was. It was late into the night. And that was about all the news we had. There was nothing else that was coming out at the time. And this was perhaps just towards the end of the day, so nobody invested any more time on what was coming forth until the next morning when the story just exploded. Now, in that time, there was something that didn't sit with me. It felt uncomfortable. I was not processing what was happening. I felt like it was a very strange thing, but that opened the can of worms for me. That led my story to come out. In the weeks that followed, I started opening up and speaking about what happened. And I think that was where I affirmed to myself that this cannot go on. It has happened far too long and it will continue happening, but somebody has to stop and put the brakes on this thing, which is not to mean that nobody has, but this needs all the hands it can to make it possible.
So that's how you really woke up to your purpose in that very dramatic, cathartic manner. Ladies and gentlemen, here's something that we need to pick up from Kirthi's journey, which is you take away 2 apples, I give you the remaining 3 apples as well. It may seem like a young girl's naive response, but you know, most of our characters, the characters that we are, that we personify, are already seated deep inside us and can be traced back to our childhood most of the times. I'm not talking about this from a scientific point of view. I'm talking about this from a point of view of having observed life. And therefore, to me, that is Kirthi's giving nature. The fact that you took away 2, so why don't you take away the other 3 as well? I don't have a problem giving you. So it is that giving nature that has shaped her life and has given it a sense of purpose that today she embodies. And you know, the other part that she talked about, that cathartic, dramatic awakening, and the next day she was actually winning an award, if I remember right, at the US Consulate in Chennai for work that she had done for an NGO. I remember her sharing this with us, and she was asking herself, why am I getting this award? What is the purpose of this award when so many people around me are still being subjected to this treatment of violence, inequity, injustice? Now that very nature of asking that is a sign of purpose, having found you. See, we're all born two times. One, we are born on the days we are physically born, on the day when we physically enter this world. That's our birthday, and we all are familiar with that. The second time we are born is when our purpose finds us. And that moment is unique for each person. In Kirthi's case, it happened through the case of the Delhi gang rape, through a new sticker on the television screen, through an upcoming event that was happening at the US Consulate the next day. And these kind of, confluenced to give her that awakening. In some cases, it slips in, purpose slips in. In some cases, it grows from within you. It's been there simmering in you, and it grows and takes shape. So purpose is not about just making money. So she's a lawyer by training, and she could have taken a career in the corporate side as a legal expert or as a cause-related expert on the legal side again. But she decided to follow her purpose. And so purpose is not only about making money. Jim Collins and Jerry Porras, the two management thinkers, in their book Good to Great, say that purpose is beyond making money. It's beyond making profits. It's your very raison d'être, the reason for your existence. I don't like the word existence, because human beings are not supposed to exist. They're supposed to live. They're supposed to thrive. So I would change that to raison for your creation, the reason for your creation. And when purpose finds you, you find meaning. You find that you can wake up in the middle of the night and dive deep into what you believe in doing, and you will not feel uncomfortable doing that, although it could be a lot of struggle doing that. The fact that you talked about it, Kirthi, with such clarity, I'm grateful to you, though I know it must have been very painful to even go back and bring those thoughts again and share them with us here. But purpose is so beautiful that it holds your hand through these times, and I could see it from across the Zoom call. Let me now ask you. So in 2012 December is when you kind of had this awakening, and your purpose found you. But for the next several years, you worked on building a model around that purpose, a working model around that purpose. Walk us through that journey. You virtually, or you did give up an established corporate or legal career, and you chose to walk this very blurry, cloudy line that many people will not walk. How did you manage to do that? What was the working model around the purpose?
So when I came out with my story, my parents were my first confidants, and I took it to them unabashed. My parents listened to it, and my mother told me that I had two courses of options before me. One being that I could wallow, I could allow for this grief to take over and follow its lead, or I could do the opposite. But regardless, it was going to be my choice, and what I chose would have their unconditional support.
Wow.
So I decided that I did not have a decision. So 6 months went by in the course of, let me just be with this, because I'd never made friends with my emotions. I never made friends with my reality. And in 6 months after that, on my mother's birthday, the Red Elephant Foundation was born on the 5th of June, 2013. And I called it the Red Elephant Foundation because, very honestly, if I called it Center for something, I wouldn't have showed up for work. I'm very intimidated by names like that. But more seriously, though, the idea was to paint the elephant in the room red, to get people to talk about issues that nobody was otherwise addressing openly enough. Now, you had these conversations among gender advocate activists, you had these conversations among lawyers, but these conversations in community where these incidents were happening were not going to find any room to happen if nobody was going to paint that elephant red, so to speak. So with that in place, the model that I set up was one that would involve purely volunteering, to give from the heart, because I was very certain that such a thing like this cannot and should not be monetized. Nobody should face violence. Nobody deserves to go through it. And so if that is the case, why should somebody have to pay a price to save their lives, to save themselves through knowledge or otherwise? So with that alongside, I continue to sustain myself as a content writer, as an editor, and that's something I continue to do today. Both things that I'm very passionate about. And I like the idea that you can have two careers because they give you the space to explore different creative solutions that both can offer each other. So while I set up the Red Elephant Foundation, I honestly thought it was just me doing this by myself, but the outpouring of support that came in, it was tremendous. It started with friends. I was one woman with one laptop for a month. Soon it became 15 of us across the country who built into this vision. We started looking at curriculums, looking at ways to tell stories and ways to evoke those stories to be able to build the culture of peace, so to speak. And that snowballed until I had close to 700 odd volunteers. But the thing is, none of us were all working at the same time, because I kept it as an open door policy, acknowledging the fact that even if you're privileged to give as a volunteer, there are days when you can't. And that's okay. So we have a no deadline culture. We have, unless it is a very pressing obligation that has to go out. We've had a very successful no structure culture, which means that decision making is democratized, is flat, and takes into account the last mile whose voice may otherwise not be taken into account at all, because every decision you make is going to impact the last mile more severely than it impacts the majority. So that's the voice we need to hear. So this model for me seems like a very sustainable one, in the sense that it gives you the freedom to operationalize your privilege, to speak to oppression, to dismantle oppression, without making those that are oppressed pay a price to avail something that they deserve as a matter of right. So it's been about 8 years in that model. The model still continues, albeit in a different form, with some modifications today.
We'll talk about that, the newer version of that model. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I just wanted to ask you a pointed question. In this time, you supported yourself with content writing and virtually living a second career in order to be able to pay your bills. Would I be right in that?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, okay. See, that's the important thing. I'm glad I asked that question and you clarified and re-emphasized that because I didn't want the learning to be missed out on the audience. You see, we, as you know, as entrepreneurs, we all have to invest ourselves in a physical manner and in an emotional manner. It calls for two kinds of investments: an emotional investment and a physical investment. In the case of social entrepreneurship, most social entrepreneurs get the emotional investment right. They get the, you know, they're very passionate, they own their ideas, they're you know, completely immersed in their ideas. But many of the social entrepreneurs, many a time, miss the physical investment. And what Kirthi's story here, fiscal investment, the money side of it, the one that pays your bills. What Kirthi's story here tells us is you can be a little crafty here. You can pursue a cause that you believe in and do something to earn an income from what you're passionate about, and use the little income or the steady income that you get from this stream of earning a living to pay for your causes, or pay for your bills and for your causes in such a manner that your cause moves forward. And I think that's a very, very pragmatic, down-to-earth idea, Kirthi, and I'm thankful for you for putting that model to work for 8 years and being here to tell a story. Because typically people think NGOs are down in the dumps, or NGOs need big funding all the time, or that people who are single you know, person operation, they are always crouching at the bottom of the barrel. They are, but you've shown that it can be done with a lot of smartness and dignity. Thank you so much. The other observation, of course, is I'd like to tip my hat for your parents for having let you just be. I mean, such a profound support you received from your parents, who said you can be led in the direction of your pain, or you can be led in the direction of your action, and you can choose whichever path you want to go, and either way we will support you. I think that's a fascinating example of parenting. Thank you so much, Kirti's parents, for being who you are. Let's move on, and let's move on now to talk about that new avatar, or the improved avatar, which you now call the Gender Security Project. So is the Gender Security Project the Red Elephant Foundation rebranded and repackaged, or is it truly a new, improved, purposeful, evolved avatar of what you were doing earlier?
That's an interesting question, actually, because it usually happens with somebody who is associated with what they create, that one often has to find the balance between what they created and what they are continuing to do now. So in that sense, no, the Gender Security Project is independent of the Red Elephant Foundation in several ways, but it speaks to an extended vision. So what the Red Elephant Foundation started with in 2013 spoke to a world order that was still perhaps alive to some extent in 2019. And in that time, we managed to work with close to 13 to 15,000 children across the state.
Wow.
And 2 schools outside of India as well. And the real fillip for the change came up when one of the children we worked with, who's now into college, came back and said, "Ma'am, everything you taught us in that workshop about gender, I practice it every day, but everybody else doesn't. The school I go to, the college that is, I go to, doesn't. So how can we make this gap go away, ma'am? I'm just one person." So what that spoke to us and what that told us was that we created ambassadors of our work who are fighting to take it forward. But the structure on the opposite side has not responded as it should. So GSP and the Gender Security Project is an attempt to switch gears and have a conversation with structure to expand the way structure looks at gender and weaponizes gender in ways that keep certain populations out. So we do that through dialogue with policy, we do that with advocacy, we do that with training. We in fact got into a training program with the Tamil Nadu Legal Services Authority very briefly before all of this happened, and so that did not take off as it should have. But
did we lose you there, Kirti?
Oh, Shankar, can you check?
Yeah, you're there? You're there?
Yes.
Kirti, yeah, could you go over that point again, please?
Sure. So the idea behind GSP is to have conversations with structures in a way that the people who are being trained to deal with structure have something to dialogue with to start with. Countrywide, globally, there's so many conversations around how certain kinds of behaviors are not acceptable. Where these conversations didn't exist 20 years ago, today they are largely the norm. But system is not responding. So I think we want to have the conversation with system, turn it on its head a bit, and shift gears towards this direction.
So that's what GSP does now.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
So I have a related question. I'll come to that. But before I go there, I just want the audience to understand that the Red Elephant Foundation was basically addressing the population that needed to become more aware of gender security, of violence, of possible abuse. And there was a lot of education going on with that population. But the experience gained from that journey and that conversation that the young person had with Kirti led her to examine the whole system, which is what the Gender Security Project now is beginning to deal with. So it's not just dealing with one audience group, but it's dealing with the system as a whole, and has now got a more expanded, clearer, sharper vision. Would I be right?
I want to say that you're right about the expanded, clearer, sharper vision, but I think I'll let the action speak for it.
So on that front, I wanted to ask you, how have you structured GSP now? When we say advocacy, research, and education, what are we really talking about?
Sure. So this time, though, the audiences that we're going to work with are those that are in good power. So if we say education, we're not going to classrooms with schools.
We're
not going to students to talk to them about peace and gender, but we're actually going to those who are in positions of power. We want to work with We want to work with people who are in charge of society, but aren't empathetic enough in the way they deliver their work. So that's the renewed vision, that's the renewed focus area for the Gender Security Project.
Okay, and you have a wonderful product there called Sahas, which is a very physical product that one can touch and feel in a sense because it's an app. I'll come to that, but what I want to share here is that all entrepreneurs go through an evolutionary process. I mean, all life is evolutionary. So you start off thinking earning a living is what life is all about. And then as you grow older and older, and when you come to my age, you begin to realize that earning a living is only one part of life. The bigger part of life is just living, just being, just celebrating. So there is a spiritual evolution. Similarly, entrepreneurs go through an evolutionary journey. And the evolutionary journey is often aided, abetted, and led by that sense of purpose. So purpose is a magical drug, and it leads to that sharpening of the vision. It leads to greater focus, and it leads to absolute clarity on what must be done, and more importantly, on what you don't want to do. So leadership, as anybody who's been in a leadership role will understand, is as much about knowing what not to do as it is about knowing what is to be done, what can be done, and what must be done. So in Kirthi's case, I think the structure of GSP, the Gender Security Project, now embracing the larger system is probably a part of that evolutionary journey. And the whole idea is now to talk to policymakers, to talk to people who are in positions of power. You know, even if they are not in a position of policy, they're in a position of power in terms of controlling stakeholder groups, working with them as much as working with the audiences who are impacted by both the violence in a sense and by the education about this entire space. So I think it's an overall 360-degree approach. It's a lot to chew. We'll talk about that in greater detail, but I want to ask this very important question on your app. Kirthi, you don't have an engineering background. You don't have a tech background. And then you go and put out an app which has been downloaded in 190 plus countries and has helped survivors over the time that it has been around. And even in this lockdown, more than 1,100 survivors have reached out to you using the app. How does one go about making an app when they don't know the A of technology?
I think one of the things about the vision and the model is that when you are setting up an initiative, there's no task too big or too small for you to do. You have to be the president and the plumber, the electrician and the executive, the CEO and the carpenter. So which means if something has to get done, you do it. So for me, Sahas actually came about as a wake-up call, as rather a response to a wake-up call. One night when I was asleep and I received close to 16 missed calls and 31 text messages on WhatsApp from a friend who had moved away to the UK after marriage, never having lived abroad, never having dated or seen anyone before her marriage. This was the first man she had met through an arranged match, and she was married off to him. Now, it turned out that for a year and a half, she had been facing ruthless violence at the hands of her husband. He was keeping her away from speaking to her family. He wouldn't let her out of the house. So in the process of, he would also keep her locked. So in the process of, I think, coming back home and missing some documents from his workplace, he went back, leaving the door unlocked. And she had escaped that night, trying to reach as many people as she could. Now, she's not in India, so there's a time lag, and whoever she's called in the country was not reachable. So that for me was very scary, because there could be so many more who don't know who to reach to start with, because they may not have friendly people to, first of all, rely on. And even those people, how equipped are we to support our friends when they reach out to us with these requests? So that started with a mapping project. I started looking up organizations in every country. I I used to do very basic coding at the time with websites, was able to put together a crowd map, but that was not something that worked, and not everybody does that comfortably. So that was when I realized that this needed something that can go in the palms of a person as far as possible with as much privacy, which is the mobile phone. Now, I went to several companies asking if they could code it, and of course it's a no money model, so would they do it for love and fresh air? They took the love and fresh air, they didn't give me the app, so I wound up without any of the resources I wanted to go forward with this process. So I decided that if I wanted this, I needed to get it done, and I would do it myself. Well, how hard could it be? 1 month, I put myself through a course on Coursera. I taught myself to code. It was traumatic because there were times when I would see code in my sleep coming at me. It would just take me for a toss completely. I just would be put out for hours with the fact that I had to sit with so much code. But somehow, by the end of it, I think it was just sheer resilience and the desire to see it done. By the end of the month, the app was ready. I put it through a bunch of testing rounds with several friends who also work in the gender space. And they came back with good reports, except that they said it was English. And obviously, as a tech tool, it meant that only some people could access it comfortably. So the next phase began. How do we make sure more people can access it, even if they don't have a mobile phone? So I built partnerships with organizations who could take it to the last mile. I took support of translators who this time did it for love and fresh air and actually gave me the product at the end. So we got it done in 6 of the UN's official languages. And right now we have Hindi and Tamil being proofread before it goes on the website and the app. And slowly it has evolved into several different formats. Now it's a mobile chat app, which means that you can actually get onto a chat platform, whether that's Facebook Messenger or Dialogflow, and ask the chatbot to pull resources up for you. It's an anonymous Telegram channel. It is soon going to become, if I'm lucky, a WhatsApp bot as well, because that's a channel that most people are using. So I would like to call it more of an experiment rather than just a physical product. And I want this experiment to become redundant as soon as possible, so that there's no reason for anyone to have to use it at all. And that will be the real success of this app.
What a vision! What a vision! I think there are so many flavors to your story. I don't know where to start from. But the first thing I'm picking up is entrepreneurs always find a way to get things done. That's the key to entrepreneurship and true entrepreneurship and leadership. The whole world will say no, it's not possible. But the true entrepreneur, the true leader will go out and get it done. So president to plumber, CEO to carpenter, you know, from being a lawyer to an app developer. Yeah. So how do you transcend that? You can learn that from Kirthi. It's amazing that she calls it an experiment, and she hopes that it'll be on WhatsApp very soon with the WhatsApp bot. I think this is truly amazing. My favorite part about Sahas is just the name, the fact that you are reminding people to be strong, to be courageous, and courage comes not from the absence of fear, but the ability to look the fear in the eye, and that ability, you're giving them a tool to access that ability. So it's amazing. You remind me of you know, a movie that Vaani and I saw the other day on one of these OTT platforms. It's called Harish Chandra Chi Factory. It's a Marathi film, and it's a film on Dada Saheb Phalke, the father of Indian cinema. It's a biopic on him. So Dada Saheb Phalke goes to, you know, tries his hand at photography, running a printing press, and yet his love for cinema only grows. And he goes away to London, pledging his last rupee in order to understand how cinema is made. And he learns making motion pictures in 14 days. His version of Coursera, Kirthi. And he comes back in 1912, April 1, 1912, he comes back and he founds a company called, I think, Dada Saheb Films Company or something. And that goes on to make the first feature film in India called Raja Harishchandra, and we have a thriving movie industry because of that one man and his courage to experiment. So Sahas is an experiment, and I leave it there. Okay, and I do hope that your vision of it becoming redundant, that people don't have to use it anymore, actually comes true. And comes true soon. It will come true, but I do hope it comes true soon. Let's move on. I want to ask you a question on your global team. You're sitting here in Chennai. I know today suddenly the world is a lot more closer, thanks to all of us being locked down in our homes and having to connect on platforms like Zoom. But you started this way back with Red Elephant Foundation, and now with Gender Security Project, you have 700 volunteers, often working without funds and without the means to have resources to do many things that they're doing. So what's the secret of being able to get together a team and getting them to believe in something that seems a little difficult to even wrap your head around?
Sure. So I think the first formative idea that we started with is that we will not monetize this work, because nobody should have to pay to be able to lead a safe life. And therefore, if we're not going to monetize this work, we will not expect to receive funds from a donor either. The reason being that donors also have their agendas. They want the numbers that they can translate into perhaps their books or their marketing requirements, or however it may be. So in the process, they will also dictate the vision to you. They will perhaps have a say in it, and we wanted absolutely nothing to do with it, because gender makes a lot of people uncomfortable, especially when you speak about what side they are on, especially if they are oppressors based on gender, as in targeting people based on gender. So that in itself attracted a tribe of people who thought in a similar fashion. Now, I'm not dismissing the fact that there is a certain amount of privilege involved in being able to give like this, but it is that privilege that we wanted to harness. Yes, we have the internet. Yes, we have the capacity to speak in English. Yes, we have the capacity to cut across borders and work together. But in that process, we were trying to make use of the privilege we have to bridge the gap in communities that did not have that privilege. A lot of people have had their challenges with a model like this, because they say that this is emotional labor. How can you expect the person to work for you? And that's when I would always respond saying, I'm not asking anybody to work for me. I'm not even asking anybody to work. The point is, do you want to see a world without this? Great. Do you want to join one out of many initiatives that are doing this? Please, the doors are always open. And the only condition is you contribute when you can and how you can, which means then a lot of our projects at the Red Elephant Foundation have evolved on the fly. They've evolved literally. It depended on who had an idea and who had the capacity to contribute to that idea and shape it. So which means there are several projects that I had nothing to do with, but that bloomed because somebody was able to give at that point, that somebody's vision found some kind of an outlet in the creative engagements with another person. And the third last thing that worked and continues to work in our favor is everybody is a leader and everybody is a follower. We leave our egos at the doorstep. We are here to learn. We are open to being corrected and to correct another. So there is no condescension. There is no holding back for fear of being shut down. It's an open space where we are here to grow and evolve and eventually just fill in that little blank between our birth and our death years. And that's all that counts.
How beautiful is this? Kirthi, we lost your video for a while, but we were able to hear you all the way through. And I'm so glad that was uninterrupted. This particular answer that you gave is the subject of perhaps an entire class in leadership and management. How do you engage with your team in a manner in which they are willing to share a destiny? That's what I would call this class, this master class, you know, this session with you. Because a leadership's greatest role is to be able to inspire a team, and inspire a team by telling them where they are going, why are they going there, how do they get there, and what do they achieve at an individual level by getting there. Now, the achievement at an individual level is really coming from not money or reward or recognition, but from a shared destiny. that we are here to create a safer world. And you have layered that with an icing on top of it. And you've said, nobody should be having to pay money to be safe, which means the regular route of donors is not open to the gender security project, the regular route of donors. So you may have other means of funding, but you will not open it up the way a typical NGO or a not-for-profit would open up, which means you are at one level enhancing the purpose quotient. At another level, you are making the entire model a little more complex. And yet you have 700 volunteers, and that speaks volumes about leadership. So thank you for explaining that to us. I think this is remarkable that you can actually get people together. And may I ask you whether this is a global team? These people are based all over the world, are they?
Yes, yes, it is a global team. The majority in India, though.
Majority in India, and so and participation is completely voluntary.
Completely, and on their time. So they get to figure out how much time they have and what they want to do with that time as well.
So it's a very democratic ownership of purpose model.
Yes.
There is a purpose, and there is a democratic ownership of the purpose. It's self-empowering. Fascinating, fascinating. Okay, Kirthi, I would have wanted to ask you a couple of questions more, but I'll probably go to the last question for the evening because this is slightly more, requires you to share a little insight into your philosophy here. What keeps you going, Kirthi? The work that you do is so draining sometimes, if you look at it, because I know that you were earlier on the evening when we were on a call one-on-one, you were telling me how draining it can be to deal with a survivor's story, and you're doing it day on day on day. And the instances of violence and crime against women is not necessarily coming down, right? So it is draining. And on the other side, the world is always besieged with newer problems. So even if violence against women, gender equity, a safe world for women, all of these are priority, there are newer priorities, and currently the flavor is COVID, which overtake the world, or there could be a new war between two nations that could take over. So it seems quite thankless. How do you keep yourself going? What kind of inspiration, where do you draw this inspiration from to keep going, especially when you have decided not to pursue a quote unquote regular career, and this is what you wake up to do every day? So what keeps you going? And what's your idea of happiness, if I may ask, because that's a question that I always ask my uncommon leaders. So twin questions over there. What keeps you going, and what's your idea of happiness?
Sure. So I'll start with the top, which is what keeps me going. Quite honestly, it is the idea that I am on this planet, whether by good or bad fortune, I am on this planet. And so long as I stay on this planet, I will continue to fight what irks me and what makes it difficult for me to be at peace. But that said, I also believe very firmly in the value of Ubuntu, which is I am who I am because of who you and I are together. So if something is hurting you, I'm not at peace. If my neighbor is hungry, my plate should not be full to the extent that he remains hungry. So this is just a very simple, everyday, I won't say mantra, but it is the track that runs in my mind. It is the track that leads me to acknowledge that life is more about collaboration rather than competition. And I sort of walk among some of the giants that emulate this themselves, such as like yourself and Vaani. And there's also an amazing young woman in the audience here, Bhairavi Prakash, who runs the Mitra Trust, who exemplifies this. So it's not a product of me. It is what I see from all of you, and I learn and I actively try to feed back into my everyday life. So bearing that in mind, which kind of leads me into the next part of your question, which is what is happiness for me? I think happiness is a beautiful, chaotic, confusing, and at the same time, powerfully empowering journey, not a destination. I don't have a definition for happiness because definitions lead to expectations, which when not fulfilled lead to disappointment. So I don't even want a part of that disappointment. Of course, there are off days. There are days when grief is heavy, when things feel draining. The next step feels impossible. But that is when the power of community really feeds back. I see and I derive courage from all the amazing people like yourself and like Bhairavi, as I mentioned. And I realize that that collective energy is always there for the taking, regardless of whether you ask. So why not be a channel for that energy for somebody else rather than just take all that energy inside and keep it within? Just pass it along, take a little and pass the plate along. So I think that's the only thing that I think is the firm constant, because you're the only constant in your life when you live here. So whatever it takes to make this happy, stay.
Beautiful. I love that definition of happiness as being a journey, no destination. You suddenly reminded me of Gulzar and Kishore Kumar and R.D. Burman. Musafir hoon main yaron, na ghar hai na ठिकाना, बस चलते जाना है, बस चलते जाना. So it's that journey. But the first part of your question was equally, answer was equally interesting, which is how do you keep yourself going? You know, how do you keep yourself going on that journey? And there I see again a very strong display of leadership, which is, you know, we all see situations that are problematic. You know, everyone recognizes a problem when we see it. And when we see the problem, some of us respond, look around and see who will take the leadership. And if somebody does not take the leadership, a few of us may even walk away saying, well, nobody did, so didn't I, and walk away. But a true leader is one who knows that the cost of inaction is higher than the cost of taking initiative. And so they will believe that the world needs to be saved from the problem on a daily basis. And so they will act on it no matter what cost they have to bear. And I see that reflection of that in your answer, Kirthi. You know, the fact that it can be draining is because of the passion that you have. It's because of your being one with the person who's going through a violent experience. You're not just empathizing, but you're being there in that unison is where the draining happens, and it's where the revival also happens. So it's very powerful that you're able to carry on, and you're still so young. So I can only see a lot of this blossoming into something very, very meaningful, something very, very powerful as you go along this journey. It's been a beautiful conversation. I'm not meaning to end it here. I'm going to, you know, I'd kept my chat window closed so that I don't need to see what's coming on my chat window, but I'm going to open it up and I'm going to start asking for questions to come in. But before that, let me quickly summarize what we have heard from you, Kirthi, so far. We've seen how a personal experience of abuse and bullying and a response to what was happening miles away in Delhi combined to channelize her anger into a higher purpose. To me, that's a sign of being an uncommon leader. She was getting an award that morning at the US Consulate, but it left her incomplete, and she decided to work on that feeling of incompleteness in her. And the way she worked on it is remarkable. The Red Elephant Foundation, in its evolved avatar, the Gender Security Project, the Sahas app, and a 700-member global team, that's an amazing body of work to have been able to put on the table, put on display for the world to see unconditionally and to be inspired without asking for funds, saying that there cannot be a cost on people being safe. They cannot be asked to pay to be safe. I think that's a very powerful ideology, and that makes you very uncommon, Kirthi. You're still so young, and you could have, at the same time in the past decade, really grown with your talent and with your integrity and with your hard work in the corporate side or on the legal side, and yet you decided to lead this journey and be happy on this journey with no focus of the destination, you know, confusing you or enticing you or tempting you. I think that's uncommon leadership. I'd like to leave you personally with something that someone very very inspirational, has said. Walter Gropius, the German architect and considered a master of modern architecture, he has said that only work which comes from inner compulsion has spiritual meaning. Only work that comes from inner compulsion has spiritual meaning. And he adds, if your contribution has been vital, someone will always pick up from where you have left off, and that will be your claim to immortality. Now, I'm not saying you are claiming anything for immortality, but I'm saying your integrity of purpose is so powerful, Kirthi, that someone somewhere will always pick up and make this even more productive and useful for people. So keep leading, keep walking. You are a true uncommon leader, and we salute and celebrate you. Thank you for joining us on this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it, Kirthi.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me and for giving me this chance to reflect as well.
It's been beautiful. I'm now going to look for questions, and if there aren't too many questions, I have two more. So hold on there. We might not have finished this conversation yet. Okay. Here are the questions. Amazing as always, Avis and Kirthi. That's one. I'm going to the top and scrolling down. A lot of good evenings, excellent curation. Oh, thank you so much. Awesomeness. Okay, so eloquent and full of grace. I need questions, people. I need questions for Kirthi Jayakumar. Okay, not that we don't want accolades, but
Obviously, you go ahead with your questions. We got quite a bit from my viewers from YouTube, Facebook.
Okay.
Please finish this. Otherwise, we'll go with the questions which has come from YouTube and Facebook.
Okay, so I had one question for you, which I'll ask on behalf of the audience as well. How do you think people in the audience, how do you think people like me, Vaani, Group Captain Vijay Kumar, all of us who are in a way witnesses, bystanders, as you would call us, how do you think we can be more participative in the journey of the Gender Security Project? What is our responsibility and role as bystanders when we see violence, when we see inequity?
Sure. As simple as it is, just start from where you are. Do what you can, because every hand and every little bit of support makes all the difference. So whether that is you seeing somebody that works in your apartment as a domestic help or a neighbor in need of any of this information, make it available to them. Or just make yourself a resource available to an individual to know that you're a safe space. So they know that they can come and talk to you. Where you can have conversations on uncomfortable topics, just open up the door and do that. And Avis, I'd like to reference to something we got to do together as a classic example, which is the Not a Joke campaign, where Avis talked about how he was disturbed by all of these WhatsApp messages that sort of came up with very sexist tones in the name of jokes. And that conversation was pretty much on the same page right from the word go, which is that these things should not happen. It's not comfortable. So we came together to create an online campaign, which actually went forward to becoming very, very impactful because it led to a lot of dialogue in several communities that we worked with. So maybe just start by sowing the seed. Get that doubt to creep into someone's mind, and then let that doubt do all the work while you sit back.
So bystander involvement and engagement is through awareness, making a small beginning, and perhaps being more vocal about it in either through a campaign or through conversations. So it's one step at a time, basically.
Absolutely. And it doesn't matter how big or small the step is. You start where you are. You start with what you can realistically contribute, because these are draining issues. And it's also a little unfair on yourself if you take on more than you want to, realistically engage with. So it's perfectly valid to start where you are.
Yeah, I'd like to only clarify one point. But the seed for my sharing that feedback with you about husband-wife or sexist jokes on WhatsApp was really from Vaani, who flagged it off with somebody at a cocktail party and said, "Sorry, I don't approve of you sharing nonsensical husband-wife jokes which are sexist." So that's how it all started. So it started with a woman, and I'm proud she's my soulmate. So I'd like to ask a question which has come here. How do you in your organization, Kirthi, communicate the core values. And this question is coming from Sai Abhishek.
Sure. Hi, Sai. Thank you for your question. We do not believe that a human being has to be trained to imbibe core values. We do not believe that there's a need to sit you down for X number of hours through an orientation. What we do is to live those ideals and those values. And that is what our work is about. That our work becomes the ambassador for that. So if you sit on the other side and you believe and you consume those values through the work and you want to engage, then I think we already have a value match. We already have a stakeholding and a common ownership in that value. So why have to communicate over and over and again when you actually can live it? You continue to embody it in every step you take. The main reason why I don't believe in sort of quote unquote training or orienting a person to these values through a sit down and a dialogue is because nothing has a more lasting impact than action. And if you've seen that result through the action you take, those lessons stay with you forever.
Live the values. How wonderful. You know, I think it takes eons for organizations sometimes to understand something as simple as that. Thank you for saying it as simply as you did. Vasanti Rangarajan here with the next question. Will those who have gone through traumatic experience, will they become volunteers? That's her questions.
Sometimes. Several people who have gone through traumatic experiences and have benefited from, say, Sahas or the workshop that we've done, they have come back to us and continue to engage with us on their own time in different capacities. I will not name them. I will not name the capacities either, but they believe in the vision, quite like what the previous exchange shared. So yes, they do. They do.
Padmaja asks you, Kirthi, what roles do you really need volunteering in?
Let's talk. Let's see what roles you see yourself making a change in, and let's make that role possible. You can email me at info@gendersecurityproject.com. We do not expect people to fit into roles. We create roles for people to fit into on their terms. So there you go.
Lovely, lovely. Vijay, do you have questions from the YouTube listeners? Your audio, Vijay, your audio.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions which has come from YouTube and Facebook. And one thing is, a couple of them, they asked the reservation for women. There's almost 50% of Indian population is women. Now, there is a serious issue going in the parliament for even reservation to member of parliament. We have done some reservation at Panchayat Raj level for women. There are also a lot of things happening. We should do reservation at the government job as well as the corporate job. Do you think, extending reservation for women and all these opportunities will really solve this issue, what you have been discussing?
It's not the only thing that can, it should not be the only thing, rather. So while reservations are a foot in the door, I think there needs to be a very active approach towards integrating and including a gender perspective, whether it's a workplace or a political setup. Because even if you're going to include women for the sake of a quota, it doesn't mean you're mentally or in terms of a mindset there to accept that inclusion and behave in line with that inclusion. What we've seen happen is several workplaces may have introduced a quota, and we've seen women get into the quota, but once they're in the workforce, they face all kinds of misogynist microaggressions. They're elbowed out to the point that they resign, and then the company says, oh, we tried it, but it didn't work. Now, that didn't work because there was no mindset change accompanying it. There was no social climbing, really, or breaking of the glass ceiling, as figurative as it may possibly be, to make that a really sustainable change. It was just checking a box. So if you're checking a box, no point.
Hey, Avis, you would like to add something more? Yes, there'll be some questions addressed to you too. What you want? You keep asking questions. Let us ask some questions to you.
I think my answer is very simple. That I wouldn't specifically qualify it as this layer of society or that layer of society. I think I'd say that to support what Kirthi has been talking about, all of us individually have to make an effort to address this by starting more conversations. It's how we raise our families. It's how we flag off harmless, sexist sentiments in our everyday interactions with people. It's how we see it on social media. And I think without any sense of feeling of holding back, we have to flag off these instances. And the respect, therefore, that we bring to the table for women goes a long way in the way they're treated by others. So I think in every interaction, it's a moment of truth in every interaction. That's where I leave it.
Okay. We have more than 1,100 viewers watching this program, so we're getting a lot of questions, and I will just pick and choose which is relevant to you. One is, there's a general impression that women suffer more than men during the pandemic 19. But you ask Avis and me, we all do all the working at home, but the impression is that women are suffering more. I mean, notwithstanding, is it a general impression? Is it a true statement that women suffer more during the pandemic?
It is true, sir. It is true. Now, you and Avis working at home is perhaps rarer than the norm. It is not the norm. In several households, the domestic load on women has increased. Domestic violence has also increased. And to the point that seeking help is not possible, whether because infrastructure outside is not accessible at all, or just making that call is impossible because there's somebody breathing down your neck in a violent way. It is oftentimes the case that, one of the first things men come up with is, but we also suffer. Now, the point is that we are not negating the fact that there's an adverse impact on men. We acknowledge as women in this work, as feminists, we acknowledge that patriarchy adversely affects men as well. But it is also the same men that use that patriarchy to affect women adversely. So you see, there's an automatic imbalance in this kind of an equation. So we don't call for women's rights at the cost of men's rights. We call for everybody to rise to a position of equality, because there's a greater future in in a world of equal stakeholding.
Super. We wanted the message to convey to the men. That's why I asked this question, because there's always a thing when men have to contribute for the success of women anyway. The next question related to something similar. Then we'll come back to you, Avis. I think maybe there's one last question for me. Afterwards, I'll hand it over to you for your concluding remarks. We need to get more funding into great business that are founded by women. How do we help female entrepreneurs through the fundraising process, from getting access to the capital to telling the right story to negotiate competitive terms? Because this is one thing women lack in terms of projecting themselves in front of venture capitalists or doing anything. What is your one word of advice to women entrepreneurs, that how they should position themselves in terms of getting all the support what they need for the businesses?
Sure, sir. Can I ask if the person who asked the question was a man or a woman?
This is from Ram from YouTube.
Okay, I'm going to assume
concerned
that it
about
is a
women.
man based on the name. All right. No, so in that case, my answer would be just offer up space. Women can take care of the rest. If you have social capital and you have access to resources, to the communities, to funders, whatever it takes to make a business possible, please give the women this space. That's all it takes. Let the women do the talking, let the women tell their stories, let them present themselves, because they're going to do a great job of it. They believe in their vision. But the lack of space is the only thing that keeps them out. Very often it's a boys' club. So if you can dismantle the door of the boys' club, maybe break it a little also, that'll be great.
Super. What do you, Avis? We are on time now.
Yeah, we are on time. I'm going to ask Kirthi one last question, which is an important question. So it comes again from Vasanti, who asks, what help is given as remedial help? Will it include sustaining the strength to handle violence? Which is, what is the support you give a survivor? I think that's the question.
Right. So survivor support is entirely dependent on what is realistically, feasibly, and internally wanted by the survivor. Do they want to get out of a situation? Then we provide them support in that direction. Do they want medical counseling or legal help? Then we provide support in that direction. The reason we go with this model is because violence takes away a sense of control over one's life. It takes away their agency in that sphere. Whereas just because a person faced violence does not mean that their agency is away, does not mean that others can decide for them. What I think is good for you in this situation may be the worst possible solution for this situation. And I can't impose it on you because you know your impact best. So we place the agency in the hands of a survivor. Where the survivor wants direction in that, we're willing to support them. So we offer end-to-end support. You have access to legal, medical, counseling support, to employment opportunities, to education and further skilling opportunities. It's all available on the app. We go by what the survivor wants to go with first and offer support there.
Kirthi, good answer there. Thank you for that. Would you please repeat your email ID, because there have been a couple of requests for it again?
Sure, that's info, I-N-F-O, at gendersecurityproject.com.
info@gendersecurityproject.com. And somebody wants me to repeat the quote on inner compulsion. You can Google it. It's Walter Gropius, who said, and I'm going to use this to summarize the evening as well, only work that comes from inner compulsion has spiritual meaning. You can drop the word spiritual if you don't understand it. Only work that comes from inner compulsion has meaning. That's powerful in itself. And that's what I'm going to use to summarize this entire conversation with Kirthi. Not only does she bring that inner compulsion into play every single day in a manner in which she inspires people around her, like you, me, everyone. Not only does she do that, I think we all need to do that in the way we deal with and give dignity and respect to women. After all, each one of us is born to one. Each one of us is born through one. We may disagree with people, we may disagree with a gender, we may disagree with people belonging to that gender, but I don't think we have a right to disrespect or violate them, or in any manner practice violence against them. And I think that violence is not only about physical violence. I think using expletives or cracking quote unquote harmless sexist jokes, I think all of that is violent, according to me. So if we have to help Kirthi onward with her mission, we have to commit to being, engaged bystanders and not inactive, passive bystanders. I leave all of you with that message. Thank you so much, Kirthi, for joining us this evening. I wish you, all of you viewers, a lot of happiness. Celebrate the time that you have with your families. This is in a way a blessing that's bringing us back to our roots and teaching us the joy of intelligent living and happiness with what is. Edu irukko jo hai, uske saath khush rehna seekho. Be happy with what you have. Over to you, Vijay, for your closing remarks this evening.
Thank you, AVIS. Once again, thank you, Kirthi, for joining this evening. Fascinating, and you are integrating great insight and thought-provoking statements. Really, I'm quite sure the kindle the thought process of many. But we firmly believe in MMA that women are the future of our thing. If you have to progress it well, you have to progress it. Unless they progress, we do quite a number of events: women at work, women, future of women, digital, quite. Exhaustive attention we pay to women, empowering women actually. So with hosting your program today, thanks to AVIS, it really added value to what has been our thinking and what you want really add. And we'll be always welcoming you to MMA to share your views, thoughts, and any way you can help, and any way you think we can do something else, we'll be more than privileged to be with you in your journey to empowering women. Thanks, AVIS, for really facilitating this talk this evening, and as usual, ably moderating and the conversation to bring the best out of the speaker. That's always one of the best point of AVIS is you can bring the best out of the speaker. That is what is very, very important. And we are very passionate about bringing, I know the next, we are all waiting for the next session. We already identified the speaker. Thanks so much. And all the viewers, more than 1,100 people watch the program live on YouTube, Facebook, webinar, and also around 60 people on the Zoom because of the restrictions what we imposed. Thank you so much. This clearly shows your sensitivity towards the issue what we discussed this evening. Thank you so much, and stay safe. Stay healthy. I think keep obeying the orders till 5th. We don't want another incident to happen as happened in some part of the Tamil Nadu. So I think it's in your own interest. You should really obey the orders and obey the rules so that you keep safe. Not only that, people around you keep them safe. Good night till we meet again. Bye-bye, and stay safe. Keep learning and wear the mask all the time when you go out, step out of your house. Thank you. Bye-bye and good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, AVIS. I think you can take it off live here. Done. Shankar.